Hi, my name is Roman, and I will guide you today through this Quiver XT training presentation. This is part number 1, and it explains how to use in the field CPD Radar feature of the Quiver XT meter. Here is our list of topics for today. We'll tell you what Quiver XT can do actually for you. We'll explain CPD nature and how it behaves. We'll tell you how passive radar technology that is behind the Quiver CPD radar really works. We'll tell you what are the best strategies for searching CPD sources. We'll explain you what the CPD radar is displaying on the screen and how to understand it. We'll tell you what testing conditions are important. You will find out how to use CPD radar from the hub site to check if the CPD is present in the particular node before you decide to drive 10 miles one way. This is, of course, for those people who can access hub sites, and it would be good if someone at the hub site had also the Quiver for this type of verification. We'll tell you what are connection scenarios, because they are a little different than those that you were using while working with the spectrum analyzer. We'll tell also about other features of the CPD radar that help to reveal signal from the noise, and you will find out how to work to find intermittent CPD sources. Quiver XT has many functions and operation modes. Two most important ones are CPD radar and network traffic compatible TDR. CPD radar will let you see at what distance from measurement point is the common path distortion source, even when it's deep in the noise floor. It can see multiple CPD sources in a node from the fiber or RFI node down to the last distant passive on the distribution network. NTC-TDR, that is a subject of a separate presentation, will show return loss on all the passives between two amplifiers, like 2 amps, or between fiber RFI node and an amp, and it will show distance to all of these passives and reflection sources. We talk about common path distortion when the forward signals that go through a corroded connector or other nonlinear junction are creating intermodulation products that affect the noise floor in the downstream and in the upstream both. This will be especially well visible in the return path, because in the return these intermodulation products will be amplified by the return amps. This type of noise will cover entire bandwidth of the upstream and can severely impact performance of the signal transmission over the SC-QAMs. In analog era, you could easily identify the CPD presence by seeing the 6 MHz spaced peaks. They will not be present in full digital network as long as it has really full digital signal, and there are no groups of analog channels. This situation is often called just noise, or sometimes ingress by a mistake. CPD is not ingress, it's nonlinear distortion product. It's similar to the CTB and CSO, although it's not exactly the same. I'm sure you have seen screenshots like this. They are examples of service impacting CPD that makes the CNR to drop below 30 dB. 30 dB is the value that DOCSIS describes as alarming. CNR drop below 25 dB can cause transmission stop or severe throughput reduction on all the upstream channels. Here this pink line is showing max hold, green is live signal, red is noise under QAM, which is completely flat. This is a good example of CPD. This is showing, of course, that CPD is there, but we don't have how many active sources are hidden here. And similar situation is on the left-hand side of the screen. Also, elevated noise floor, flat. Here also flat with signs of high-pass filter here, but they are not telling anything about how many sources are there. You will be able to see them with the Quiver. Here is a next example of CPD in upstream spectrum. You can see here flat elevated noise floor modulated with these arches. This happens when signal of the CPD source is very strong, and when there exists also a microreflection tunnel on the way of the CPD signal down to the meter. Pictures on this slide are showing examples of CPD sources found with CPD radar. Devices that look corroded from the outside not always will be the CPD cause, and relatively good-looking contacts might actually be a CPD cause due to their contamination and existence of a very thin layer of corrosion. So, corroded connections, over-tightened and loose seizure screws will be most often seen as problems causing CPD. But there can be also overloaded amps, broken amps, magnetized ferromagnetic cores in older passives. They all can cause CPD. And when connections are loose, this is obvious that CPD can be intermittent. The CPD level can vary during the day depending on temperatures, forward signal fluctuations, or vibration, and that can damage the nonlinear junction that is causing this CPD effect. This means that often small level CPD can be just temporarily not disturbing. It has potential to become a big problem. All devices that become intermodulation sources can be ranged with Quiver XT CPD radar function and traced down very quickly. This is an important information. This slide helps to understand how a stable in its behavior CPD source will react to a varying downstream signal level. If we're increasing forward signal level at the location of the CPD source, the associated CPD level and reduction of the noise floor in the upstream will grow, and it will grow much faster than the growth of the forward signal is. How this can be used in finding intermittent CPD sources and in better understanding where the CPD source can be located will be explained in the next slides. This graphics is illustrating relation between the CPD signal level depending on CPD source location in between two actives. So here is a little explanation what you see. The upstream signal level measured here is this bar. Downstream measured here at the input of the amplifier is this. Received CPD level is here. Downstream at this location, upstream here, downstream here at the CPD source, and upstream level here. So what is happening when a CPD source is located right after the amplifier? So it's very simple. The CPD source that is located close to the amplifier will be exposed to much higher signal levels than in other parts of this network stretch between two amps, because going further away from this amp, the forward amplitude drop can be even like 30 dBs here or more. So when we have this level at the CPD source location, it will create strong intermodulation, and this intermodulation will be amplified by the return amp gain. It will result in relatively high level of the CPD signal in comparison with the upstream level at this location. When the CPD source is located away from the amplifier and the forward signal acting on that CPD source is low, the CPD signal level will be also low. It will go through the loss of the cable, which will be not that huge for low frequencies. It will be additionally amplified by the return amp, but still it will be low. So please remember that when you are searching for something that is having big impact on the monitoring records, like at night or in some periods of time, you might be looking for a small level CPD source at the time that is located right after the amplifier. And when you are searching for something what is currently having high level in the upstream, and you can clearly see it, it will be a device that is nearby the output of the amplifier, where the forward signal is the highest. This slide is showing how the CPD signal is being born and what products are created. The CPD radar uses as references forward signal and only narrow band of the upstream. You can see here QAM signals and an OFDM channel. The QAM signals can intermodulate with each other, next to each other, and when they are next to each other and start intermodulating, they will create a product that will cover bandwidth between 6 and 12 megahertz in the upstream. If we add another channel to our consideration and we take that there are intermodulations happening between these two channels, it will add intermodulation products that are covering from 12 to 18 megahertz. Our CPD radar takes energy located between 8 and 16 megahertz in the return and compares that with an intermodulation product built from the forward channels applied as a reference. Here is a little more detailed explanation how the Quiver CPD radar works. When we are working in the plant that is still having some analog signals that are existing in a group, you can use filters that are delivered together with Quiver in that little plastic bag. These filters can help you to remove analog signals from the input and make more easy signal processing in the unit. So when we apply forward input signals to this meter, there is inside CPD emulator, which is essentially a diode. It creates intermodulation products. It acts like a radio frequency mixer. Then from these products, we take only small bandwidth between 8 and 16 megahertz in standard option, and we process it in the correlator with the signal that contains CPD that we search for in the return. It is also filtered by a bandpass filter. And what happens? Both signals are arriving, they are processed, and the meter comes up with this plot. What do we see here? This is not spectrum, although it looks similar. The noise floor here we call correlation noise floor, and we prefer it to be as low as possible. And there are means to help it to go down really low and reveal all the peaks that will be hidden in this noise. On the x-axis, we see time delay, and this time delay is displayed also here as a marker indication. Marker goes automatically at top of the highest peak, and below this marker, this delay is translated into footage. This is your distance to this CPD source in the plant. This is measured from the place where the meter is connected down to the impairment source. We call this technology Passive Radar, and we use brand name Xcor. Now, with this meter, you will be able to troubleshoot without disconnecting anything in the network until you are deciding that this is the spot where you will repair something. There is no disruption service necessary. You will test signals using test ports and a test probe that you can attach to the scissor screw port of different passives or a 90-degree angle connector. So no more pulling pads. Pulling pads is not good when you are searching for CPD. CPD has a nature that makes it go away when you turn off forward signal or disconnect continuity of the return path. It might go away for some time, but it will surely be back, and nobody knows at what moment and with what level. So with the Quiver, you will be able to see the distance to something like this. You'll be able to see how many sources of CPD are there. With the radar, you will be able to find out on which side of a device the problem is present, or maybe there are two different problems on two different sides. Until now, you were using a spectrum analyzer, and you are familiar with this sort of picture, where you are looking at the noise floor. Everything will look different. Now you will know how many CPD sources are there and which one is having the largest impact. And if you see spectrum with elevated noise floor on both sides of a splitter, with the Quiver, you will see if there are two different CPD sources on different sides of the splitter. With the spectrum analyzer, it was simply not possible. How to use Quiver? It's very simple. You turn it on by pushing this button. You press and hold it, then you'll see the screen blinking, and it will load. All the firmware will show you then this operation mode screen. You see here listed all the features that this firmware version is letting you use. This group of 4 buttons, we call them hotkeys. Their function is different depending on what is currently displayed on the bottom of this screen. More you will find in the manual, all experienced by trying the meter. We are turning on the CPD radar. This is item 1, the first item on the list. So when you turn it on, it's enough to press enter. When you press enter, this screen will show up. The meter has 2 ports. The left-hand side port is the forward input for the forward signal reference, and the right-hand side port is the return input. You will use it for the return spectrum analyzer. You will use it for the CPD radar. There is additional information on this screen. There are these 3 options. You use normally standard bandwidth 8 to 16 MHz. There are also narrow adjustable bandwidth 4 MHz, where you can put a scanning window of the Quiver input that has bandwidth of 4 MHz. You can center it someplace in between the SC quams or at the portion of return path that is not affected by very strong ingress. Wideband 5 to 100 MHz lets you work with entire bandwidth of the return path, processing more energy and making indications more accurate with more resolution. And of course, this is 5 to 100 MHz in high split, but In the regular networks with older return path, it will work to whatever is permitted by the diplex filters. You can see on the list of operation modes active CPD radar. Please do not use it until you are instructed that you have to use it in certain situations. This mode will be helpful for testing a piece of network that is excluded from the normal service, disconnected, and you can apply scanning signals. In active mode, it will actually transmit chirp signals in the forward. So if you use it on active plant in service, you can jam the forward signals. So please do not do this without knowing that you have really that part of the network not connected to the services. This mode will be very helpful in verifying if a house network and drop line is ready for using in high split and full duplex mode, because for these two modes it will be important to make sure that there are no CPD sources in the drop lines, and they are called then PIM sources, passive intermodulation sources. That will be a subject of a separate presentation on advanced user training for the CPD radar. Searching for CPD sources with the Quiver is easy and quick process. Why it's quick and easy, you will see in a moment. Before you start working with Quiver CPD radar and also NTC-TDR, you make sure that you do have some information about your network. You need to have understanding where are the amplifiers and what is roughly the distance to the furthest ends of the network, the longest coax. Like here, this is the longest coax. This is the mid-range. This is the shortest maximum coax. So when you test from a fiber node or from some amplifier, and you get information about the distance to the CPD source. Let's say the CPD source is at this tab. You can judge by the distance indicated on the meter that this source will not be in this part of the network. It can be either here or here. So to save time, you can actually skip this splitter and you can go straight here, test. You can test on the other side and you will find out how far away you are from the CPD source. So your next step will be to verify one span before expected location of the CPD source if it's still there. Why to do this from one span before or the active before? There is a simple reason. CPD source can be easily discharged by shaking the cables when you put the ladder on it. When you put the ladder on the cable and it shakes, it will affect both directions before you and at the front of you on the network. The next group of devices will feel vibration and CPD might go away. You will, however, know with the Quiver that it's there. With the spectrum analyzer before, you were having the situations that you were seeing CPD go away and you were convinced that it was at the location where you were actually testing. No, it was very often ahead of you. These situations will not happen anymore for you. You'll be sure that you are fixing the right place, the right way. You can verify that. For those who would like to experience what CPD radar is showing and other functions of the Quiver XT, you can download from our website, from Arcom Academy part, this training tool. This is a simulator program. You need to install it on your computer and then try how the keyboard works, what the signals are looking like, and become familiar with the features of this meter. Thank you very much for watching this part of the CPD Radar training. The next training talks about more details on how to use the CPD Radar function in Quiver XT.